Pragmatic loner Hachiman Hikigaya writes an essay describing his view on the lives of contemporary teenagers, which displeases his language teacher, Shizuka Hirasuka. As punishment, she forces Hachiman to join the Sobu High School Service Club, and requests that its sole member, Yukino Shida, try to remedy his broken social skills. This immediately results in a clash between both students, and Shizuka proposes that they contest their ideals by helping people sent to the club. The next day, Hachiman learns that Yukino was paradoxically made an outcast because of her beauty, and relates to her differential way of thinking. Afterwards, Yui Gahama requests that the service club help her bake cookies for a friend, and Yukino fails teaching her the basics of cooking. Hachiman tries an alternative approach and uses psychology to get Yui to realize that the sheer act of doing something for another person means more than how the act turns out. The next week, Yukino and Hachiman discuss Yui's request with respect to the ultimate goal of personal improvement, versus the rewards of working towards said improvement despite risking failure in doing so. Afterwards, Yui shows up at the club and thanks both Hachiman and Yukino with homemade cookies she made herself. Shizuka once again reproves Hachiman for basing his biology report on his dissatisfaction with the dominance hierarchy established by social groups. Later that day, Yumiko Miura presses Yui for a straight excuse when she tries to break away from their social group to have lunch with Yukino. Yukino then shows up and demands an explanation for Yui's tardiness, but ends up forgiving her. However, Yumiko makes an outburst when Yui focuses her attention on Yukino, prompting the latter to call Yumiko out on her self-centeredness. The tense atmosphere drives the other students out, and Yui uses the opportunity to explain that meeting Hachiman and Yukino helped her realize that she can be her own person and not force herself to do what others want from her, which Yumiko accepts. The following morning, a delusional teen named Yoshitaro Zaimokuza shows up at the service club. After the group beats around the bush to dissect his ostentatious personality, Yoshitaro asks that they help review a light novel he wrote. Hachiman and Yukino then stay up all night reading his novel and present their critiques the next day, which turn out less than positive. Despite the service club's brutal honesty, Yoshitaro sincerely accepts their words and promises to have them review his next literary work. Yui interrupts Hachiman while having lunch outside his favorite spot and excitedly tells him about her growing relationship with Yukino. During the following gym class, Saika Totsuka practices tennis with Hachiman and eventually asks him to join the tennis club. Hachiman then asks Yukino for her opinion on the offer during the next service club meeting. However, Saika arrives and requests that they help him practice tennis for the next few days. While the group practices one lunchtime, Yukimo and her group demand to use the tennis court and ignore the fact that Saika has permission to use it. However, Hayato Hayama proposes that they have a doubles match with the winner gaining access to the court. The match then begins with Hachiman and Yui versus Hayato and Yumiko, until Yui sprains her ankle and switches with Yukino. After a bit of pre-game banter with Yumiko, Yukino dominates the match until her stamina runs out and entrusts the game to Hachiman. Hachiman then makes his last two serves by using his knowledge of the sea breezes and hitting the ball with a high arc, which wins the game. The spectators end up ignoring the service club's victory when Hayato saves Yumiko from injuring herself during the final serve. While on their way to school, Hachiman and his sister, Komachi Hikagawa, discussed the car accident he was involved in on what was supposed to be his first day at high school. Afterward, Shizuka reprimands Hachiman for his choice of future occupation and reminds him about picking a 3-person group for the upcoming workplace field trip. Later, the service club receives a mysterious shared text message. Hayato then requests that the service club put a stop to the messages, which paints his clique members, Kekuru, Yamato, and Oka as delinquents. The service club then links the message to the field trip and deduce that one of the three plans to eliminate another so they can form a group with Hayato. Hachiman and Yui then take turns gathering information. However, Yui ends up failing miserably due to her inability to remain subtle. Afterward, Hachiman begins observing Hayato's clique until Saika interrupts him. However, he solves the mystery when Hayato joins their conversation. Hachiman later explains the cohesive relationship between Kekuru, Yamato, and Oka, and has Hayato take himself out of the group to give them a chance to bond. Hayato then thanks Hachiman by grouping him and Saika for the field trip. Shizuka scolds Hachiman for arriving at the very end of after-school classes. He then makes his way to the local cafe and runs into Yui, Yukino, and Saika, and they are joined by Komachi and her friend Tashi Kawasaki. Tashi explains his concern over the late-night excursions of his sister Saki Kawasaki, and the service club resolve to get to the bottom of the matter. The next day, the club employs various schemes of approaching Saki, which all end in failure. With Komachi's help, however, the service club learns that Saki works nights at a cafe and eventually tracks her down to a bar at the top of a high-class hotel in Chiba. The service club then makes an exit after tensions flare between Saki and Yukino, when they discover that the former had deceived the hotel management about her age to obtain employment. Saki then meets with the group the following morning, and they learn that she had been saving up for college. However, Komachi points out that she should not have made Taishi worry, and Hachiman proposes that she apply for a scholarship instead. Afterwards, Komachi shocks Hachiman with the revelation that Yui was the owner of the dog he had saved in the car accident. Believing that Yui was only friendly to him out of guilt, Hachiman ends their acquaintanceship during the field trip. Yui stops coming to the service club meetings and seems to drop out altogether. Following her previous encounter with Hachiman, and Shizuka tasks them in recruiting a new third member. Yukino proposes that she would like Yui to rejoin the club by celebrating her birthday. Later that weekend, they visit the mall to present a shop for Yui, with little luck. The pair eventually settle on purchasing some trendy accessories for Yui until they run into Yukino's older sister, Haruno Yukishida, who playfully teases them with her transparent persona. Much to their surprise, Yui also runs into the pair, and Yukino invites her to the next service club meeting. At the next meeting, Yukino explains to Yui that they have intended to celebrate her birthday and thank her for all the things she did for the club. Hachiman also uses the opportunity to clear the air with Yui and explains that she doesn't owe him anything and hence should not pity him. Yui agrees that she never thought of herself as pitying him, but the complexity of the situation leaves her at a loss for words. However, Yukino helps repair the rift between them by sincerely explaining they should drop their current situation and begin a new path, which they decide to take. Hachiman tries his best to relax during summer break and ignores the backlog of messages from Shizuka concerning the service club activities. Shizuka eventually manages to lure Hachiman out and takes the service club and other Sobo High students to a prefectural park in Chiba to observe an elementary school summer camp for a few days. During the orienting event, Hachiman and Yukino bear witness to the deliberate shunning of the young Rumi Tsurumi by her peers, and the many failed attempts by Hayato to remedy the situation. Rumi senses a similar aura from Hachiman and Yukino and confides her problem to them, with Yukino adding that it would only snowball once she gets into middle school with the same people. The Sobu group later tries to come up with ways to help Rumi that evening. However, tensions flare when Yukino shoots down an idea by Yumiko based on her general lack of experience in interactions with people like Rumi. Unable to sleep that night, Hachiman finds Yukino in the woods, and she explains her desire to help Rumi as she sees a reflection of Yui in her, and also a bit of history that exists between herself and Hayato before going to bed. Unable to sleep as well, Rumi sits by a stream under the starlight. The summer camp continues, and Shizuka asks the Sobu group to prepare a test of courage and bonfire event for the evening. After some preparations, the Sobu girls relax at a nearby river, and Rumi joins Hachiman on the bank, where he outlines the waning probability of holding on to elementary school ties as one grows older. However, Rumi explains that she had already given up on making friends based on reciprocating her current treatment to her peers in the past. In order to assist Rumi, Hachiman proposes that the Sobu group create a source of conflict within the peer group that shuns Rumi. This would reveal their true self-allegiance and ultimately shatter the ties between them, thus moving the focus away from Rumi. The plan then seems to work when they implement it during the test of courage, until Rumi saves the girls in a dramatic turn of events. Afterwards, during the bonfire event, the Sobu group notes that Hachiman's unorthodox plan had set the stage for the girls to split apart after betraying each other and hence slightly improve Rumi's situation. The camp then ends the next day, and when Haruno comes to pick Yukino up, Yui and Hachiman recognize the Yukinoshita limousine as the one that struck Hachiman in the accident. Yui invites Hachiman and Komachi to the annual summer fireworks festival as thanks for taking care of her dog, but Komachi backs out of the offer to give Hachiman and Yui a chance to get together. On the day of the festival, Hachiman and Yui try to compensate for the awkwardness of going out together for the first time by shopping around for some items for Komachi. The fireworks soon begin and the pair run into Haruno while looking for a place to watch the spectacle. Haruno uses the opportunity to explain a little of the complicated relationship between herself and Yukino, and laments that Yukino has difficulty in forming meaningful relationships with people. At the end of the festival, Haruno mistakenly refers to Yukino's involvement in the accident, but Hachiman brushes it off as water under the bridge. Afterwards, Hachiman takes Yui home, and she explains that she would rather Hachiman, Yukino, and herself not keep their feelings bottled away, and further laments that she would have befriended Hachiman even without the accident, which he rejects based on his own casual reasoning. However, as school resumes the following week, Hachiman begins hating himself for believing that Yukino was incapable of lying since she had opted to conceal her involvement of the accident from him. Shizuka volunteers Hachiman as the male representative of 2F for the Cultural Festival Committee, and Hayama later nominates Minami Sagami as the female representative, who further volunteers to be the committee chair in an attempt to further her self-growth. Afterwards, Minami requests that Yukino assist her with the chairing responsibilities as vice president. Much to everyone's surprise, Yukino excels at managing the festival responsibilities far more effectively than Minami. In the meantime, Hina Ebina takes charge of the stage production and Haruno tries to apply for a musical performance. Minami then suggests that the committee help prepare for the festival, with Yukino arguing that the logistical work takes priority. However, more than half of the committee take Minami's advice and leave the remaining members in an uphill battle with the growing paperwork. The next day, Yukino efficiently takes on most of the work, but when Hayata criticizes her for it, Hachiman moves the focus away from Yukino by blaming the deserting members. Afterwards, Minami passes out most of her responsibilities to Yukino before going back to help the other classes around school. Overwhelmed with paperwork, Yukino takes most of it home and fails to show up at school the following day. Hachiman and Yui visit Yukino and find that she had worked herself into exhaustion by taking most of the festival work. Yui scolds her for not relying on them more, and Hachiman reinforces her argument by explaining that in an ideal world, people rely on each other. But even then, he doesn't know if it would be the right course of action. The next day, the festival committee attempts to brainstorm festival slogans, which all indicate a sense of camaraderie. Hachiman cleverly proposes a slogan by using the kanji for people to highlight the unfair division of labor which Minami had introduced into the committee. This stunt grants Hachiman the consent for the rest of the committee, and they come out in droves the next day to falsify his words. The Sobu High School Cultural Festival begins sometime later, and Minami fumbles her opening speech due to stage fright. Despite this, the rest of the festival turns out to be a huge hit, especially Hina's yaoi stage production. Hachiman later takes a break, and Yui joins him for lunch and explains that she had decided to wait for Yukino to open up to her and will also actively try to strengthen her bond with Hachiman. Elsewhere, Minami locks herself in the bathroom after being riddled with embarrassment. Sobu High's cultural festival continues, and Hachiman is stuck carrying out his duty as committee member by documenting the day's events on film. Komachi shows up and is surprised to find her brother actually taking a bit of responsibility. As the festival enters its last stages, Haruno entertains the audience with a full orchestra performance. Soon enough, as the closing ceremony approaches, Meguri reports that Minami is missing in action. Since she is needed to deliver the closing speech, the group decides to stall for time while Hachiman searches the campus for her. Hachiman eventually finds Minami atop the laboratory roof and realizes she is sulking because Yukino stole the spotlight away from her, despite asking for her help. Hayato and Minami's clique show up together, although she refuses to budge. Seeing no other alternative, Hachiman craftily uses reverse psychology combined with Minami's true social reality to guilt her into accepting her duty, using a tone which enrages Hayato. Afterwards, the festival ends as Yui, Yukino, Haruno, and Shizuka give their extra musical performance, followed by Minami's closing speech. Everyone shows mixed reactions on Hachiman's course of action, but Shizuka compliments him for always finding ways to rescue people from their problems. but laments that it breaks her heart since he always sacrifices himself to do so. That evening at the service club room, Hachiman and Yukino discuss how far they've come to know each other, with Yukino hinting that they've become friends. Yui eventually shows up at the club to invite them for an after-party hosted by Hayato to celebrate the festival's success. Hachiman ends up pondering that while there aren't any second chances in life, his and Yukino's ideals on society may continue to be seen as deviances. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you in the next